is not a Ford Mustang GTD. This is a Ford GT, the halo product from Ford. And today, well, we have a lot to talk about. Yes, we don't have the GTD in front of us, but today we have official Ford GT racing driver Billy Johnson with us. He actually worked on the Ford Mustang GT 500. Come on in the frame, man. It's great to see you.
How you doing? Thanks for having me,
Thank
Austin.
you so much for joining me. I wanted to link up with Billy. First off, to check out his Ford GT again. This is an amazing Ford GT build. This is a heritage model from 2017, right?
It is the 1966 Heritage. So the paint scheme, coloration of the car that won Le Mans in 1966.
Did you not win P1 to get the number ones put on it? Why do you have number 2?
Yeah, only second best. The second best won in 1966.
Really cool to see. Hey, I know that both of us are hardcore Mustang enthusiasts, and you've actually raced like the GT4, right?
Yeah, so I've won a lot of races in Mustangs, going back to the FR500C into the Boss 302R and GT350 RC that we won the championship with Multimatic and Scott Maxwell as my co-driver.
Awesome.
And then also racing the Mustang GT4.
And that's actually how we met originally too, because I always was taking my Shelby Mustangs to the track. I love going to the track, running them, and me and Billy met at the track, and over the years we've had a lot of fun using these vehicles. So today in this video, I think it's a good opportunity to answer a lot of your questions and thoughts about what all is this GTD compared to the Ford GT. It's really cool seeing this new Mustang GTD, because personally I've always wanted to see a supercar Mustang come out to go against all the exotics. The GT 500 that you helped develop, I mean, that car can take down a lot of supercars, but this takes the whole next level, right?
Absolutely. So working on the development of the GT 500, that's a big car. It's a big, heavy car, and the fact that it is faster around a racetrack than almost all the supercars that are out there is just a testament of what Ford's able to do and what that whole development team did with that GT 500. So that was a very, very special program that I was a part of. Same with the development of the Ford GT, and then now the GTD taking that Mustang platform to this level of performance is just very exciting to see.
This is why it's so great that you brought your GT out, because this vehicle, it basically paved the way. And both vehicles, though, have different mindsets. This was, like you were telling me, the Le Mans race car turned into the street car, but then the mindset with the Ford team was they wanted to turn the Mustang into a supercar. It's gonna be interesting to see how that stacks up compared to this.
Absolutely. So actually taking a step back, rewinding to like 2014, 2015 timeframe, the GT exists because Ford was going to take the Mustang to Le Mans. But for the rules and to be competitive, it was determined that the Mustang platform was not going to be competitive at Le Mans. They brought back the GT car itself to be competitive against those other cars. And sure enough, in 2016, I was there as one of the race car drivers driving the number 66, and Ford won Le Mans. So the whole idea of this car was not to be a Ford hypercar or a Ford supercar. It was to win Le Mans 50 years after 1966 historic victory over Ferrari. Now, Ford has coming back with the Mustang to race in that same class, in the GT class at Le Mans. So originally, the Mustang was supposed to be at Le Mans. It wasn't competitive for the rules. This car, super competitive and was great. And then the rules changed. No longer having the best car is the way to go. So Ford now brings the Mustang to race against the BMWs and other large cars, and just the form of racing has changed. So the dynamic has changed, and that's now why we see the Mustang going back to Le Mans. That's also probably part of why we see the GTD road car.
It's like everything that Ford puts their mind to when it comes to a mission, coming back 50 years later, take on Ferrari and all these brands, they put their minds to it and they commit and they're able to achieve it. Then after the Ford GT came out, you're right, it was the $500,000 supercar, nothing else in the category really compared to on the street, right? But the mentality is now, let's take the underdog, the Mustang, and now let's put it against all those supercars. So I think this is a great opportunity, guys, in this video to talk about a lot of the engineering enhancements, also touch base on where the Ford GT comes from, and make some connections about how this GTD follows what came with the GT, but also changes it up. Does that sound good with you?
Sounds great.
Awesome, let's do it.
So the GT was never meant to be a supercar. It absolutely is a supercar, but its goal was not to be faster than the McLarens, Ferraris, Lamborghinis that are out there. It was meant to win Le Mans. plain and simple, and Ford accomplished that. What's really interesting about the GTD is now Ford's like, all right, we're gonna beat all the supercars. So they changed their focus from winning Le Mans to actually being the fastest supercar with a Mustang. So that is extremely exciting because, as Austin said, when Ford puts their mind to something, which it can be as high of a target as winning Le Mans 50 years after their famous 1966 win, they did it. So now their target is to beat all the supercars on a racetrack. Let's look at the Ford GT and talk about differences between the GT as well as the unique stuff about the GTD.
There is no better feeling when you are that underdog on the track. I have so many videos on the channel of being in like the Shelby or other Mustang, driving against other supercars and passing them, and it's a very rewarding feeling. I think the Ford team might agree with, hey, let's do that and show the whole world that we can do it. It might feel pretty good doing it, right?
Absolutely, but two parts of that. One, there's not too many cars that are faster than a GT500. Like, this is faster than GT500 on racetrack, not by a whole lot. Like, that 500 is extremely competent, but then putting a good driver like yourself, fast driver, fast car, like, yes, there's not too many people faster than you in a GT500. On a racetrack.
Well, then you take that king position slot, though, but you already knew that. You're right, and I think it's really awesome that me and you had the opportunity to check out the GTD during the official launch with Jim Farley and the entire Ford team. We got to see the vehicle up close, so everything we're talking about in this video, guys, we have had extensive experience seeing this new GTD. I have not been in it, and I don't think you have either, right?
I have not. I've not been a part of that development, so like I worked on the GT350, the GT500, GT, and other S550 Mustang platforms, but not the GTD. So haven't been part of that development program, but my old teammates, Harry Ticknell and Joey Hand, who Joey won Le Mans in the 68 car. Both of those guys, my old teammates, are my counterpart on the GTD. So those guys were the development drivers for the GTD. Myself and Scott Maxwell were the development drivers on the GT.
Don't sell it. I think it would be
I'm
cool.
never gonna sell this.
So Ford GTs are gone. They've got an empty assembly line. Why not make a new name? No more Shelby names, right? GTD, something brand new, and utilize all their specialties with working with Multimatic. And I think it's a great opportunity.
Absolutely, and that's what I think is so cool about Ford. Like, they didn't have to make the GTD. Like, back in the day, you'd have to have a homologation special. You have to have like a road car to go race that, but that's not really the case anymore in terms of you can have mid-engine Porsche 911s. I would love a mid-engine 911, just like their race car. That would be amazing. And then the old E46 BMW M3 that had the V8 in it, like there was, I don't know the details of that, but they were supposed to make a bunch of them. I don't think there's too many that were made, but those kinds of homologation specials were awesome. But Ford and Multimatic did not have to make the GTD road car to go race them. They're just making it because they could and because they want to have the fastest supercar on a racetrack.
I realize, and I feel pretty sad for not mentioning this already, if you don't know what GTD means, well, GTD is going to be the class under GT3. So they're naming the vehicle from the class, the GTD class. So that's where the name comes from, and I like it's a new name, right? We're not living too much in the past. There's nothing wrong with heritage. Heritage is good, right? It establishes brands, but let's create some new heritage, right? That's the idea, that's the thought. So back to how the Ford GT came from a bespoke assembly line, they're able to do things that they're not really able to do on a mass-produced assembly line like in flat rock. Yeah, the chassis is still coming from flat rock. It's not gonna be a carbon fiber tub like in this, and I do want to ask your thoughts on a carbon tub versus a non-carbon tub in a short second, but what I'm getting at is that they're still building the chassis at home, then they're setting the vehicle to the one-off bespoke facility where the customer gets to experience having their own street-legal supercar Mustang getting built. That's why they're able to use technology not found in the average Mustang or even technology that's homologated against on the race cars. You can't even use some of the active aero bits, and they have the opportunity at hand to build something unique. Billy, I know with carbon tub vehicles, like I have my own carbon tub supercar, just like yours, you have the Ford GT, I have the McLaren 600 LT, and obviously that helps a lot for saving weight, getting more chassis rigidity, and improving the handling of the vehicle for taking on a lot of power can a non-carbon tub vehicle still be able to compete to the same level as a carbon tub equipped supercar?
Absolutely. Like, carbon is the best. It's the lightest, it's the stiffest, it's ideal, but it's the most expensive. So the production numbers of carbon fiber cars like McLarens and Ford GTs and some Ferraris are far less, because the technology and the cost is just very high. It's hard to mass produce that. But if you look at most of Ferraris, if you look at Lamborghinis, Audi R8s, Porsches, they're all aluminum and steel. So the Mustang GTD starts off with a Mustang chassis, and then from there, it is just highly modified. It has a carbon fiber roof, which is exactly what we had in the Mustang GT4 Racecar. And then carbon fiber hood, deck lid, fenders, front and rear bumpers, all to reduce weight from the GT500. So the GT500 was able to be one of the fastest cars around a racetrack, being 95% a base Mustang in terms of the main structure and body, whereas the GTD is essentially like barely the bare shell, completely gutted, bunch of weight reduction, and then just everything turned up to 11 to improve performance and handling.
Personally, I would prefer them creating a custom chassis. However, I think they can get by without it, because even from your experience, you raced the Ford Mustang GT4. I had the short opportunity to drive that on Buttonwillow Race. It was a very fun experience. But even going back to my GT350R that I owned, or the GT500s, the platform, the chassis is able to do it. And then to name another amazing brand that I'm a big fan of, Porsche, right? They're able to put down great lap times with their GT3s or GT3 RS, and it doesn't have a carbon tub.
Absolutely, and that I think is an interesting comparison. Like, the GTD is kind of like a GT2 RS from Porsche, but the GTD has over 800 horsepower, and it is also turned up to 11 in terms of the normal Mustang has an engine, and then the GT500 has the dual clutch transmission from Tremec that I worked on the development and programming for, but that was right behind the engine, how all Mustangs have their transmission there. But Corvettes have transaxles, Aston Martins have transaxles. So instead of the transmission right behind the engine, those high-end platforms put the transmission on the rear axle. So that's a giant, massive weight, hundreds of pounds that they move from the center front of the car to the rear of the car. And the GTD uses a Tremec transaxle, which internally is very similar to the GT500, but actually it's like the
Z06.
The C8 Z06
that I used to own.
Exactly.
And that grip, I mean, having that weight out back, launch controls, sub 3 seconds was able to do. Well, it had the mid-mounted engine, obviously, but this is gonna up, as what you're referring to, getting that more neutral balance, because instead of having a 56% front weight distribution for a Mustang GT500, now shifted some of that weight out back, it's gonna level it out, right?
Absolutely, so that's gonna make the car handle better, it's gonna make the car accelerate better, because you have more mass on those rear tires to hook up those tires and put that power down. So really, the changes that the GTD has are pretty extreme.
Then throw in motorsport-inspired tubular subframe. You know, even touching base on that new transaxle, that presents a whole other challenge for cooling. And I saw this up close, I'm not sure if you noticed it. This is kind of a hard example with your Ford GT, you know, flying buttresses. It's like, what? How am I gonna point this out? I'll drop B-roll over the frame. You'll find 2 intake holes right above where the trunk would be. And if you follow those holes, that actually takes you to a radiator, and then below that is, well, that's where it cools the transaxle. Custom cooling for the transaxle. Now that looks just like that GT2 RS or GT3 RS comparison you referred to, because they also have those little scoops out back, but they have a rear mounted engine, obviously. All these different tricks they had to figure out, and that all ends to the $300,000 price tag.
It does, but going back to the coolers, having those heat exchangers in the back is what the race car has, so
really?
There's going to be a lot of crossover and similarities in terms of that, whereas for
Nice.
the GT, this being purpose-built, you have oil coolers behind the rear tires where they vent out through the headlights. You have other heat exchangers for the transaxle on the other side of the car, but the GTD is a Mustang. So you have an existing shape that you have to figure out where you're going to put those coolers. And that's exactly what they did with the scoops for both the race car and the GTD road car.
Where does the air enter?
The air enters through the scoops on the inner side of the
Oh,
rear
wow.
fender here.
That's really cool how they have hidden that away. I'm such a big fan of the flying buttresses. I wish more brands would create something like this.
These buttresses are super cool because actually the charge pipes from the intercoolers go through the buttress and into the intake manifold.
Okay, Billy, I gotta ask you. So with this all new rear suspension system that looks really cool in the billet aluminum, you know, like you're mentioning, it's got the horizontal cross links, it's got the integral push rod link in the bottom. Not only that, it is a multi-link suspension system. I want to ask you, from your experience though, with developing like the GT500 or tracking the GT4, have you thought about these ways to improve the Mustang in the past, or how much would these upgrades improve the setup that me and you are so used to?
They're massive. So going to the lengths of everything that you just mentioned, those are like the things that you dream about, but it's never possible. So creating a car like a GT350 or GT500, you have a certain box that you have to work within. And while adding Magna Ride to a GT350 from just a basic damper that the base Mustang has is an amazing technology, you only imagine and daydream about, wow, what if we had push rods for suspension? What if we remote mounted the damper? What if we had trick suspension design like what Multimatic came up with to raise and lower the ride height? Those are stuff that any engineer just thinks about, but it's never even a possibility. So to have the GTD actually incorporate that kind of technology is unbelievable. The unsprung weight is going to be reduced, so it's going to handle better, it's going to feel more nimble, sure-footed, and lighter on its feet. And then just the newest version of Multimatic's DSSV dampers.
Yeah, adaptive dampers, right?
Exactly, They're adaptive damper, which I believe is on the new Ford GT Mark IV.
Yep.
That's a multi-million-dollar car. This has DSSVs, which the technology alone is the best in the world. It's what Formula One cars have. All the top Le Mans cars, prototypes, you name it, have Multimatic's DSSV. They're dynamic spool valves. And the GT has it as well. And it is adjustable, but you have different modes. You have a comfort mode, you have a sport mode, and a track mode. So each one gets stiffer, but they're static. Once you set them to that mode, they stay that way. Multimatic's been developing for many years their active damper that the GTD will have, where it's a little stepper motor that is adjusting and constantly varying the damping of their DSSV. So not only do you have the most consistent and best hardware and damping that's ever been created, you have it real-time adjustable, so it is constantly making it softer or stiffer based off of bumps, improving handling, you name it. So that technology in itself is just massive.
The suspension system we're getting at on the GTD is an evolved version of the spool valve system we have on this vehicle. Yes. I wish I could show it, just, man, this vehicle is so slimmed down, it's like shrink wrap. Anyways, it's kind of derived off the GT Mark IV, was it, right?
Yes.
It's the racing version. So then, hey, that's a cool point. I'm curious, in what kind of seconds are we talking about? I know suspension is so critical for lap times, and I don't think people, give it enough credit online how important, even the slightest upgrades to suspension can affect your lap time. But are we talking seconds here, or how will it really feel?
It's hard to say because one, just reducing the unsprung weight going to remote mounted shocks is a big advantage. DSSVs are a massive advantage. The active DSSVs is a huge leap. And then the car also, the GTD raises and lowers, what, 40 millimeters?
Yeah, 40. So not quite the, I think you told me 50 millimeters is what your vehicle will lower.
The Ford GT is able to drop 50 millimeters in track mode. The GTD will drop 40 millimeters, but they both have a similar idea in terms of, in normal mode, you have two springs in series, which gives you a nice, comfortable ride quality. But then in the low mode, one of the two springs is locked out, so you only have one stiffer spring, and you have a low ride height, and you have stiffer spring rate to handle that low ride height. So it's the best of both worlds. Like what the Ford GT does is incredible in terms of that design, and Multimatic and Ford applied essentially that same thing in the GTD Mustang, which is going to be amazing to see.
I love aero, I love spoilers and active flaps, all this stuff. And then when he's talking about lowering the ride height, hey, that also affects with the downforce. It's less air traveling on the bottom right than the top, and that produces a suction effect. And I believe you can gain more downforce having underbody aero, right?
So yeah, underbody aero, you want to speed that air up, so you have less air that's moving faster, and that creates a low pressure area, so it sucks the car down. So the lower you are, the more effective that is.
Isn't it true that underbody aero can be more advantageous than, above body aero because you don't get as much of the drag limitations?
There's all sorts of benefits to under aero. One, yes, you don't have big draggy appendages sticking off the car, but two, it's the surface area. Like the under aero of the GT is some of the most incredible under aero that's ever been put on a road car. The whole front end is a wing underneath the front of this. The amount of downforce this car creates is incredible. But then the GTD, again, this was designed to win Le Mans, which you want a lot of downforce, but when you're a supercar and you're trying to go for the fastest lap times, you want as much downforce as you can get, and that's what the GTD is going to do, which is extremely exciting to see all the details of the aero of the GTD.
I'm very curious about it though, because since they are using the body in white chassis from a standard Mustang, they have so many different challenges they have to deal with for that airflow versus this. With mid-engine supercars, I remember hearing this from Taj and the Corvette team, how when they developed the C8 Corvette, the front windshield is actually producing downforce because it's extending over the front axle. Actually, your windshield is a bit shifted more inwards, actually towards the center. It's right above the front axle, it looks like. The body can play so much towards producing downforce, even the front windshield can. But using a Mustang body, they have to find out their own unique ways, not like a mid-engine supercar.
Well, Ford and Multimatic absolutely know how to manage airflow and make downforce, and that's why you see the massive hood vents in the GTD. Just like the Ford GT, all the air that goes through the front radiator comes out of the hood, creating downforce, improving cooling, and the GTD is the exact same. They have massive hood vents in them to improve downforce on the front of the car. And then there's also a bunch of trick under aero body stuff on the GTD as well that's active. This car has semi-active aero in terms of the wing acts as an air brake, the wing pops up in track mode, and then you have front slits that are able to open or close to increase
point them out?
Or reduce downforce, so air flows in here, and then these can be closed off to prevent the air from going under the car, which will create more downforce. When air goes through these slits, it disrupts the air to reduce front downforce when the wing is not up to balance it out. So, but those are two static modes, while the GTD has active aero. That rear wing upper element opens and closes for various conditions, constantly moving, which is even better than having static aero.
So then, wouldn't the Ford GT have a bit of an advantage for having a full air brake versus GTD, right? Because yours, it'll shoot up, kind of like the 720 McLarens in them, and create like a wall. With this new GTD, there's two different sections of the spoiler, and the top part is the part that will open and close, kind of like F1.
Yes.
Will that still have a similar effect of producing an air brake?
It
towards
will.
The back?
So when that upper element is shut, it adds downforce, which is going to help the car. So when that upper element closes and adds a bunch of downforce in the GTD, it's going to improve the braking ability of the car. It's also going to add drag, which is why you see in Formula One, right into the brake zones, that upper element closes, adds downforce to the back, which acts like a parachute to slow you down, increases rear downforce for braking grip, and the GTD will be very similar in that regard. Plus, it's a massive wing. Like, this is a fairly small wing by comparison to the GT.
And it's going to basically the corners of the vehicle, way more surface area. And is it really up in the clean air? Because I know compared to the GT4 spoiler on the Mustang, GT500, I think it was sitting much lower than this new one, right?
So the GTD's wing is much higher, just like the GT3 race car, so it's in much cleaner air, so less drag, less turbulence, more efficiency, and yes, it is just outright massive. I think it's probably one of the, like the Viper ACR has a gigantic wing. The ZR1 didn't have as big of a wing, but this thing is, and then both the GT3 and GT2 RSs have big wings, but this GTD one is a big dual element wing.
This is why this scene is just such a calling for me. I love these brand new vehicles that are trying to implement racing technology, but also not using all the limitations of racing, trying to take a whole new direction with it. Look at the 992 GT3 RS. Swan neck style wing out back, and it's got the active aero, same with the adjustable suspension points on the vehicle. I just love how we're finding all these new cars coming out that remind us of what Dodge did back in the day with the Viper ACR. There hasn't been a vehicle like the Dodge Viper ACR really with the customization in so many years, but now all these brands are coming full speed at it. So it's very exciting. Think about all this technology, right? Customization.
Well, the ACR I think had like 13 track records. They're like, we're gonna build the fastest car on a racetrack and make this ACR. And it was extreme, and they did that. So like Ford's kind of doing that same thing with the GTD in terms of this is gonna be the fastest, most badass thing on a racetrack. Yeah, it's just with so much more technology in the GTD than that Viper had. It's pretty cool.
Okay, Billy, we have to talk about the wheels, tires, and also some more of the aero up front with the fenders. So coming down here, you don't have the carbon wheels, do you? Was that available on this Heritage Edition model?
Not on the Heritage, and I'm a big fan of carbon wheels, and I was so bummed that I couldn't get an option for this because in our testing and development of both the GT350, 500, and Ford GT, the carbon wheels were worth a second per lap on most racetracks in terms of improving lap time because the wheel is lighter, but more importantly, stiffer than the aluminum wheel. The GTD is really interesting because they're going to be using magnesium wheels. So back in the day when I raced go-karts, like I had aluminum wheels and I had magnesium wheels. The mag wheels were lighter, stiffer, and just better performance. And back in like the 80s and earlier, there was a bunch of race cars that had magnesium wheels. That was kind of like the best thing to do. But you really don't see them, and you haven't seen them on many race cars or street cars in the last 20, 30 years. And it's really cool to see Ford always trying new technology. They were like the first to mass use carbon fiber wheels on cars, and now they're using magnesium wheels on cars as well. So like magnesium is a pretty interesting material in terms of it's like a neat middle ground between an aluminum wheel and a carbon wheel. So if all wheels were the same weight, the aluminum weighed the same as a carbon, weighs the same as a magnesium, the magnesium would fall somewhere in the middle in terms of stiffness and weight. So magnesium's outright better than aluminum. It's more expensive than aluminum, not as expensive as carbon, but also doesn't have the strength to weight characteristics of carbon. So carbon's still like by far the best, but yeah, the mag wheels are a neat technology to see start to use.
I think the durability for the magnesium wheels, it should be pretty up there because I know even with Porsche, they're using magnesium wheels on their GT4 RS, GT3 RS, so you find them a lot within the Porsche family actually.
Yeah, they're definitely not as widely adopted. There's not that as much, many companies that are making that. And also they have their own challenges. Every material and wheel design has its own challenges. So while it's a good middle ground between aluminum and carbon in terms of performance, it does have not as good a corrosion resistance as aluminum. And I believe back in the day, I think the wheels might have even been banned in some motorsports because once they catch on fire, it's extremely difficult to put out magnesium, and they kind of like burn whole cars to the ground. But just like carbon, a solution around some of their heat management thing is that like ceramic layer that they put inside the wheels, that white coating. It'd be really interesting to learn more about what these new magnesium wheels from Ford for the GTD as well as Porsche do to try to mitigate some of the negatives that are inherent in magnesium compared to aluminum.
I think the biggest cheat code of all when it comes to the whole tire setup, well, first off, you have a 4-inch wider front track. That is going to
That's
feel
huge.
a lot. I mean, just think about that, guys. The tires and wheels are pushed further out towards the end. That helps you with not only turn in, but also that cornering grip for stability. But then, on top of that, the cheat code of all cheat codes, 325 front tires.
So
You
yeah,
kidding me?
that front tire on the GTD is the same size as the rear tire on the Ford GT. That is nuts. And the rear tire on the Ford GT is a 325. That's bigger than most supercars that run 305s.
Yep.
So the GTD having a 325 front tire and then a 345 rear tire, and it's a Cup 2R.
Cup 2Rs.
While these are just Cup 2s, those Cup 2Rs are significantly stiffer, or not stiffer, significantly stickier than the standard Cup 2. That's going to be a monster.
So then I just can't imagine you being able to understeer it. I hope they don't tune it right out the gate so that it does understeer. Well, you know, once you put a track camber on it, that obviously improves so much.
Well, again, being a part of the development of cars for Ford and Multimatic, they definitely know how to make cars handle well. So I think that my old teammates, Joey and Harry and all the guys a part of the development of the new GTD are going to make that thing handle amazing.
I actually see a lot of guys at the track who build their time attack Mustangs. They actually do put on 315s up front or even 325s at times. It looks crazy, but they're putting on like wide body front fenders and
helps.
345s out back. Yeah. And it makes a lot of times, you know, go straight down because you have all that extra just mass of rubber on the ground, and all that resistance helps you turn faster. I mean, it's the formula. They have the formula, the cheat codes all put together.
So yeah, between not just for those guys putting wide fenders and big tires on it, the GTD has bespoke Cup 2Rs specifically made for it that are faster. You have lightweight magnesium wheels that are going to be faster than aluminum. You have that whole new design rear pushrod suspension, and then the front suspension, instead of a strut like all Mustangs have, you have a SLA upper and lower control arm like the Ford GT. And I was so happy to see like the Porsche. The Porsche race cars had SLA upper and lower control arms forever when the road cars had struts, that it took Porsche until the 992 for it to have an SLA in its road car.
Yeah.
So like the Porsche race cars, they were mid-engine, SLA front. The road cars were rear engine and strut front. Now the Porsches have SLA fronts, but the GTD Mustang has an SLA front suspension when the race car is also going to have an SLA. So again, like hats off to Ford for, they didn't have to build this for homologation reason, but they're making this stuff in their road cars that is just so much closer to the race car than many of their competitors and many of the other manufacturers out there.
Well, it does have the same type of braking system too as
Yeah, they
your
both
Ford
have
GT.
carbon
the
brakes.
carbon rotors. If you guys don't know this, the carbon rotors are massive on this new GTD, and carbon rotors in general, you're going to find them much bigger than the standard iron brakes because of the heat dissipation that you're dealing with.
Absolutely. So yes, just like you said, when you have a carbon brake, the rotor needs to be larger than the aluminum ones. And kind of the easiest way is just look at a Porsche or Ferrari. Look at the base car with rotors, iron rotors, they're smaller. You look at the carbon rotors, they're much larger. That's not just because they look cool, but just from the dissipation, you have to have more mass and surface area on a carbon brake. But that GT500 had like 16-inch massive iron rotors. They were so heavy, but they were needed to slow down that weight without any brake fade. And those cars, you could drive it stock brake fluid, stock brake pads, and you will not fade them. But they weighed so much. So now with the GTD having carbon brakes, I don't know how much that's going to take off, but between the magnesium wheels and the aluminum brakes, like trying to do the math in my head, but there's just a ridiculous amount of weight that's going to be reduced, that's unsprung to improve handling and performance of that GTD.
I remember going to the GT500 first drive when it came out, and then you had Jim Owens from the Ford team, great guy. He was showing us how the brakes, the 16.5-inch brakes, were bigger than the old 67 or whatever year it was GT500's actual wheels, man.
Yep.
You got a whole pizza size of brake rotor system, but yeah, we covered everything from the wheels, tires, the wider suspension track, the unique suspension systems on the vehicle to the aero. One last thing with the aero, we forgot to mention this, but you do have the louvers on the front fender, and those cutouts help to reduce the front end lift for high-speed cornering, which if you don't know, the faster you go, you might feel this, the front end lifts up, and all that pressure of lifting up reduces the pressure of the tires on the ground, making you not have as much turn-in grip. And did I nail that?
Definitely. So yes, that GTD is just a non-compromise vehicle, so you have those gigantic vents behind the front and also the rear tires too.
Yep.
So relieving that pressure just is better for performance.
We talked about the Transaxle. I think to wrap everything up, shall we go in the Ford GT?
Sounds good. Yeah, let's go for a drive.
Okay. Okay, here we go, getting inside the Ford GT. And is that the carbon tub on the ground? That the bare carbon tub?
Yep, that is.
Oh, nice. I realized something, Billy. We have the EcoBoost that has been adapted for not only a supercar or Le Mans winning racing vehicle, but also we have a 5.2 liter supercharged V8. And then we had the GT500's supercharged Mustang motor, kind of adapted for the Raptor R that me and you both drive. Well, we have a 5.2 liter again in this new Mustang GTD.
Yes.
So it's interesting how Ford really does take advantage of their entire powertrain systems.
On that note, the Ford GT has more horsepower per liter than the Porsche GT2 RS, which also uses water injection to help with reducing knock and timing, and Ford does not. So the fact that this car has more horsepower per liter without the benefits of water injection really is a testament to what Ford's able to do with their powertrains compared to anybody around the world. And then yes, the 5.2 liter V8, supercharged V8 in the Raptor and the GT500, now the GTD, and they just turned up the wick from the GT500's 760 horsepower, making over 40 horsepower more in the GTD.
Can I ask you this question? Because I know with the EcoBoost it's a turbocharged 6-cylinder. What disadvantages or advantages will you have with a supercharger on top of that engine block? Because wouldn't that increase the height of that central of gravity even more? Or?
Yes, ideally lowering the center of gravity is always the goal, and superchargers put the weight up high, but the way that the inverted supercharger of the GT500 gets the most of the mass down into the valley of the V itself reduces that penalty that's mostly in many supercharged cars. However, the whole engine's lowered in the GTD. I believe it's dry sumped. So you reduce the entire mass of the engine, lowering that. So yes, turbochargers absolutely are the best in terms of lowering the center of gravity and not having a big massive weight above the engine, but obviously, like we talked about, the GT500 is able to perform at supercar levels of performance, being essentially a relatively stock Mustang, where this GTD is going to be a monster. And I would not be surprised if they accomplish their goal by having it be
sub 7 minute? That's a Nürburgring? Yeah.
I don't know about Nürburgring lap. Wasn't Ford targeting that?
Yeah, sub 7 minutes.
Yes, if Ford targets that, they're going to make that happen.
Plus, we forgot to mention too, being supercharged, it's got the slight detriments here and there of that positioning of that supercharger, but you don't have to deal with the slight turbo lag you can have. I've briefly driven the new Ford GT, so a model similar to yours, the Carbon series, and you can feel out higher in the RPM. That's when the peak power really is. But in the GT500 or in your Raptor R, it's able to build that power so linearly all the way through the RPM. So you're not going to deal with even having to deal with turbo lag.
On that note, did you drive the GT in sport mode?
I don't know what mode I was in.
Because this car is actually super torquey. Like the turbo sizing and everything, it makes a lot of mid-range power.
I must have missed
So when you have it in regular mode, it just acts like a normal turbo. You get on the throttle, turbos spool up, and you have some lag. But the race cars, and also in this car, if you flip to sport mode, you have anti-lag in there. So the throttle bodies, when you tip into the throttle, will snap all the way open. The turbos will spool up as fast as they can, and then the electronic throttle bodies will close back off to keep the turbos spooled up, but give you the amount of power and response that you need. So, like, compared to your McLaren or many other turbocharged cars, the tuning philosophy of the GT was very much to improve the bottom end, mid-range, and reduce that turbo lag. And it is night and day going from normal mode to sport mode, where this really does feel more like a supercharged car than many turbocharged. In normal mode, tipping into the throttle, there you felt the turbos spool up a little bit, and we're going slower than the speed limit, but in sport mode now, like it hit, like that's part throttle. Again, we're going the speed limit, and slower actually, but just the tip in is more responsive and the turbos spool faster in that sport mode with that anti-lag. Fun fact, kind of off topic, is this twin turbo EcoBoost V6 makes more torque than the old 2004 Ford GT supercharged V8. So this is a much smaller engine than in the original Ford GT, and it has more torque.
This thing's gonna be timeless, man.
We just dropped it.
We just dropped it. We are in the low setting, track mode. It's not too stiff, man.
It's not.
It's not. That's only 4,000 RPM for that downshift. Wow. Yeah, Billy, I was really bummed when I didn't get the approval on the Ford GT application. I would have loved to track with you on the track with this thing. It's so sick. But crossing my fingers this time around, all looks good with the GTD. Hope you get one too. And we got to go to the track, because I know we will.
Absolutely.
And run it against everybody and
100%.
see how it does. That sound good? Let us know in the comment section down below. What do you think of this talk? Just two guys getting together, talking about cars. I know all you guys love Mustangs, and this is just such a hot topic right now. So please let us know your thoughts. What do you think? How much faster will this be than the GT500 or other variants? It's going to be interesting to, stack them up against each other. But I can't wait. Keep me posted on your build, man. I'll keep posted on mine. Does
I appreciate it. Sounds good.
Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Was that the down?
No,
button?
finger. Like, subscribe here. Is that what the pop-up is? Is it going to be over here? Not a thumbs down. It's like, subscribe here or there.
Follow Billy Johnson on his Instagram, billyjracing. I'll have it floating on the screen right now. And check out his YouTube channel, One Lap Billy. He does track videos like us, and he does benchmark analysis tests too, which is pretty cool to see.
We will have to do a One Lap Billy on the GTD.
That sounds good.
That sounds like fun.
Let's do it, guys. Thanks again. I'll see all of you in the next one.